Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Kareth.
Hi, everyone. We'll wait for everyone to come on in. I think some people are still connecting to audio here. All right, we have everybody, I think, slowly coming on in. It looks like it. Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We have a smaller group today, which is nice because it will be a little bit more intimate. As always, I remind people to mute themselves until they're ready to talk. And if you'd like, you can keep it in the speaker mode so that you guys can see me. It sometimes makes it easier. So I'm just looking again through this list of who's in here. Awesome. We definitely have some new faces in here. First, I want to ask if everything's going okay with Michael Locke and his family. I see that you have your camera off, and that's okay, but I know you're down in Orange County and there have been really severe fires. Do you want to unmute and share with us how you're doing? Michael? Oh, sounds like he will remain locked. Okay, Michael, we are thinking of you and your family down in Orange County where there's severe fires. And some other people who are new to us today, Michael Matthias. Hi, Michael, down in LA. We raise a glass to you and say hello. And Justin is, Justin's in the middle. Hi, Justin. Justin in Texas is a winemaker himself, and he worked at Harvest out here in 2018. So he will be a wealth of knowledge for us to add into the discussion as well. Today, I sort of plan to be a little bit more informal. I do have a deck of slides if things go off the rails, but it's really an opportunity just to sort of talk through the fall allocation release wines. Some of you missed last week's or a few weeks ago, the 2020 harvest wrap up, and we had some technical issues with the Zoom recording. So I thought at the end, if people had questions as well about 2020 harvest, we could talk about that too. Hopefully everybody has received their fall allocation wines, even John and Sharon in Arizona. It should have arrived today. If not, it's scheduled to arrive. I don't see you guys in the boxes. You might be on the next page, but it is scheduled to arrive to you guys by tonight. So hopefully your wine arrived. And I think that's just the last of everybody getting out their fall allocation wines pending weather. So we can sort of start at the beginning with the Chardonnay, which is a 2019. So we can talk about that vintage first. Does anyone have the Chardonnay or a Chardonnay open? Anyone? Hands up. Oh, good. Okay, hi. It's Sharon and John do. Perfect. So hi guys, there you are up at the top. So 2019, we can start by talking a little bit about the 2019 harvest. So in 2019, we had come off of a really big vintage in 2018. So we already expect that the 2019 vintage yields wise is going to be a little bit smaller. We had a lot of heavy duty rains and flooding in the winter of 2018. They were pretty destructive here in Sonoma County. It did sort of increase the water table in the groundwater levels. So I guess that was helpful. And then we had some early rains in May. Those were largely before flowering, so it didn't cause any shatter or pour set specifically that we noticed. But again, 2019 yields were a little bit lower. Temperatures were pretty moderate going through the spring. Mid-late September, we definitely had some significant heat spells for sure. And harvest in 2018 was a little bit on the earlier side, not quite as early as years like 2015 or even 2017, but slightly on the earlier side, getting pushed ahead by those late September heat spells. So for me, I think what I really love about the 2019 Chardonnay is the way it sort of splits the difference between the things that I most loved about 17 and the things that I most loved about 18. I think what made the 17 Chardonnay really special is really the vibrant acidity and that focused citrus character. And I think the 18 has a really nice texture on the palate, a little bit more of that brioche character with the lemon curd and a really nice palate weight. And I think the 18 is, or the 19 is bringing both of those characteristics together. It's still really young. For me, it really starts to shine after some time being open in the glass, and then it really, really starts to open up. So I think that the 19 Chardonnay is definitely age-worthy, and I think it's going to continue to get great. And if you're patient and let it open in the glass, you'll start to see some of that potential. Does anyone who have the 19 Chardonnay open, or even the 18 Chardonnay, or any Chardonnay, feel like they want to go ahead and unmute and share what their thoughts are? Anybody? Alan.
Yeah, just that we've had this open since dinner, and it's now after 7 here in Houston. So that's been over an hour, and it's continued to develop as it's been open. So I encourage people, and this is the 19. I encourage people to let it linger in the glass. It migrates. Now it's mostly citrus and tropical. Before it had a little more of the brioche and some of the other notes. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good assessment. I've also found that, the palate texture rounds out a bit as it opens as well. And I think some of that sort of spottiness where you get a spotlight on sort of the brioche coming from, the oak profile, and then some of the citrus where it's not quite integrated yet is also really characteristics of wines that are younger and need a little bit more bottle age, and will develop to where they're going to be if you're patient with them in the glass. What did you guys have for dinner with the Chardonnay?
We had a basil chicken leftover, cream of mushroom soup, and an eggplant rollatini with an herb cheese filling.
Wow. Do you guys eat that well every average weeknight?
These were leftovers.
Leftovers from our club dinner over the weekend. So.
Yeah, that sounds pretty spectacular. That sounds pretty good. My kids are getting frozen pizza tonight because I'm on Zoom.
Molars have a question, Kara.
Yeah, you bet.
So did
Hi, guys. Hello in New York.
Did you do anything different in the making between those 3 different years you talked about, or is it all just in the weather and the harvest?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's mostly in the weather and the harvest. So the one big difference was that in 2017, during the press cycle, before we pressed it, I used a Chablis press protocol, and I actually crushed the grapes before putting them into the press, which is sort of unusual for Chardonnay. I was looking to get a little bit more flavor out of the skins because they were on the lower end of the sugar spectrum for Chardonnay, and I really wanted to highlight the acidity. In 2018, because it was just sort of a wetter year, I wasn't able to crush them first because I was sort of trying to mitigate. They were, a little bit more rot than I had in a pristinely clean year. So in a case like that, you don't want to break the skins before you whole cluster press them. And then again in 2018 and 19, I changed the press cycle to using the long and slow press. So learning about press cycles and how it affects the wines has really been interesting to me because I started off always making red wine and we don't worry about the press cycle quite as much. But I've really liked the long and slow press cycle. Obviously, if you're working at the winery, it causes a headache because it takes twice as long for your Chardonnay to slowly inflate, press, hold, rotate, deflate. But that has sort of been the big change from 18 and 19 compared to the 17. And what it does is it does the bulk of the heavy pressing at a lower pressure. So most of the juice that you're getting is between 0.4 bar and 1.2 bar. And I know that's kind of technical, but that's just sort of the way the press cycle works. And I've been very, very happy with it. So that's a good question. I've been pretty consistent with the barrel program though. I've really it's like the Zin. Once I sort of hit on the combination I like, I've stuck with it. So for the Chardonnay, it's usually about 30% new oak. And it's a cooper called Taranceau, which is not a traditional Chardonnay barrel, but I had bought a used one my first year from Jeff and Bibiana Pizzoni, and I loved it. And then one from Vicard that's actually a Sauvignon Blanc barrel. So what it does is it gives you some of the palate weight and texture that you'd get from new oak, without giving it quite as much of a toasty imprint as you might expect from some of the more heavy toasted traditional Chardonnay barrels that you might find over in Napa, for example. And those ones might give a lot more of a coconut aromatic, a toastier aromatic. And I think everyone is familiar with that style. What I think is fun about Chardonnay is it's really very much more winemaker driven. So we know how to make things buttery. We can do that if we want. We know how to add more of those tropical notes through barrel choices, but it makes it really fun for the winemaker because we have a lot of play in the palate with doing Chardonnay. All right, I got to put on my reading glasses to see if people are raising their hand for more questions. Oh, it's Mike. Yeah, I can see you. You're right in the middle.
Hey, I just wanted to tell you, we celebrated our oldest grandson's first birthday on Sunday. You may have seen pictures on Facebook, but I took 2 bottles of the 2019 Chardonnay, and I think it was probably the hit of the party amongst the adults.
Awesome.
To make sure everybody understands. The thing that came across to me was and it may be the barrel program that you have. I thought I had a sense of a little bit of oakiness, but not overblown, but none of the vanilla overblown like you get. It reminded me so much of a great white Burgundy. It was so good. And I know I was drinking a baby, and I can't imagine how it's going to be in the future. So well done.
Thank you, Mike. And I'm sure all you guys know, because I've emailed you and written to you, that nothing makes my day more than hearing these stories of, we opened this at my grandson's birthday, we went on a hiking trip and we carried your bottle to the top of the mountain, and when we camped and had dinner, that's what we opened. Those kind of emails and those kind of stories really truly make my day and make me so happy that I can be part of everybody's life, especially these days when things continue to be really challenging with COVID and, headlines are depressing. So those kinds of things, they just lift me up so much. So thank you. And happy first birthday to the little guy. So
we called him the wild one.
Do you call him the what?
Well, it was called, my daughter-in-law said wild one. And it was sort of like everything that's happened in the last year, plus the fact that, he is such a ham. When you pull up your phone, he wants to get his picture taken. He knows to turn on the charm. So it was a great day, and we're blessed. We're very blessed.
Oh man, I having teenagers, which is super fun too. I do miss having little people, when they would wear the things that I told them to wear. Any more questions on Chardonnay? Nope. All right. Well, then let's move into the Tory Hill. So I pre-poured glasses of everything. So now I've got the Tory Hill up. And hi to Steve Zellman, who also is joining us today for the first time. So hello to you. Welcome. And welcome from LA also, another LA person. So I think as everybody knows with the Tory Hill, what makes it special is, number one, it's our estate fruit. Number two, the kids draw the label and it changes with every vintage. It always features our Pound Dog Dexter. We've stuck with the rainbow ever since we put that on there. Just one of the girls put it on for fun. But this is a wine that had gotten a lot of TLC at a restaurant in Palm Springs. And the buyer said the LGBTQ community has really embraced this wine because it has a rainbow. So we've stuck with a rainbow for everybody because everyone likes rainbows. And we just feel blessed that our wine can be inclusive for everyone. So that's pretty awesome. 2018 growing season. We have no complaints. So the Zin and the Tory Hill are the first, and last year's Chardonnay are the first wines you're seeing from 2018. And I think you're going to continue to see delicious wines coming out of California in 2018. So the 2018 growing season was basically picture perfect. There are no complaints. We didn't have the oppressive heat spells that we saw in 2017. Yields were super robust. We had ample water because we had been coming off a drought in 15 and 16. I mean, I think that everything coming out of the 2018 vintage is really, really delicious. And I think it's going to be a very crowd pleasing vintage. There seems to be a lot of concentration of flavor, a lot of, sweetness and ripeness to the tannins. And, I use sweet with quotation marks, approachable, soft, silky tannins, as opposed to, obviously with tannin, we're not talking about sugars per se. And as always, my approach with the Tory Hill is something that is really classically true to the AVA. Does anyone have Tory Hill open? A Tory Hill or a Russian River Pinot open? Awesome, Mike. Oh, and Justin too. Okay, so let's start with Mike, then we'll move over to Justin and his wife.
Okay, so first of all, the nose is extremely perfumey in a very nice way, but the cinnamon and baking spices just overload my ability to smell. I mean, they're just so beautiful. It's unreal. Lisa got the perfumey thing, and she'll join us later, but I think it's very nice. The thing that strikes me about this is the fruit is so beautiful on the palate, but yet the acidity is just absolutely mouth-watering, fantastic. I think the balance is fantastic. The tannins are ultra silky and just, they're there, but they're not there in a good way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the Tory Hill tends to be, approachable and balanced from a young age. And I think that's okay. And that's some of the fun of Pinot is that each wine and the way it develops really speaks to sight. Justin, welcome. Hello. I haven't seen you in a while. And
I know. It's been way too long.
Thank you for being here. Do you have stuff to offer? I hope you do.
Just Kareth, my wife, Jody, Kareth. She's heard a lot about you, of course.
Hi, Jody.
I had the honor of working with Kareth in 2017. And to be honest, we are drinking the 2017, of course. And we had just drank the Gaps Crown 2017 that I had sent you the photo of. And we loved that. And then now we're into this one. And, for me, it's all about memories. I can't get, when I smell the winery, I smell everybody we were working with that season and the whole atmosphere. So it's almost impossible for me to taste this like a normal wine because it takes me back to the winery there. So just good to see you. And we are loving the wines, by the way. They've all been spectacular.
Thank you. Do you want to share a little bit about what harvest was like in Texas this year or last year? Because there's a couple people on this call who have been out to Texas wine country recently for vacations, and I'm sure they would love to hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, and I would. I wish I had good thoughts to share. I will say this: we just did our first planting in 2019, so we are not open to the public yet, but we planted our first vineyard in 2019, and so this is our second leaf. And for us, it has been fires last year and hail this year, so it's been a tumultuous beginning to a new venture. But I'm sure people know in Texas, a lot of the fruit is grown in the high plains here. And what happened last year is we just had a really massive freeze that came through. And so this year's harvests, from what I understand, basically it was like this. Yields were half what they normally are, but the fruit that we got was actually really good. It was a drier than normal season, which for us, we have more disease pressure than especially Sonoma. And so I'm looking forward to the vintage. It is just sort of it's in the tanks now, and everything is sort of getting ready to get barreled down. But it's smaller yields for sure this year. And like I said, last year I was so engrossed in planting that I literally had zero to do with any fruit anywhere and never saw any of it.
So what have you guys planted? Which varietals do well in the High Plains?
Well, and to be, for those who know Texas, I'm in Fredericksburg, so we're in the hill country. The High Plains is Upper West Texas, and it is about 4,000 to 4,500 foot elevation. We're about 2,100 foot elevation in the hill country where I'm at, and then the valley in Fredericksburg is about 1,600 foot. And so what grows well in Texas is a large, diverse state. People think like Texas fruit should all be, I don't know, everybody thinks Napa is all Cabernet, right? Texas is so broad, it's the same size as France. So keep that in mind when you think about Texas. It depends on which region you're in. And the big ones are Tempranillo, a lot of the Spanish varieties, the warmer weather varietals, of course, given our heat and our humidity, naturally do much better here. So even there's some sneaky stuff around here. There's varietals from North Africa, Southern Italy, Spain, Portugal. And we're still throwing stuff at it to see what grows the best. Obviously, it's a lot younger industry in Texas relative to other parts of the world, I guess you could say. And
That's super cool.
so we've got an experimental block. Our 3 acres has got 3 different reds and 4 different whites, and we're doing rootstock trials and the whole thing. So we've got a lot going on trying to hit the mark for our particular, I guess I'll use the word terroir, location. And we're going to plant what works best after I try not to kill it for 3 years.
We know about expensive farming projects here at Torrey Hill. So congratulations, that's super exciting. Does anyone sort of want to share what they know about planting a vineyard and rootstock? Anyone want to unmute and talk about rootstock versus scion and share what they know? Anyone? Hi, Kristen, late joining. See your mom over like on the other side there. Okay, so I mean, we can just spend 1 second diverting about what Justin talked about, talking about planting vineyards. So when we plant vineyards now in modern times, we plant them in 2 parts. We talk about the rootstock, which is the part that's under the ground, and it's the part that you don't see. And then we talk about the scion material, and the scion material is what's on top. That's varietal and even the clone. And the way I like to describe it is sort of like putting together an outfit with pants and a shirt, and then you fuse them together, sort of like the way you tuck your shirt into your pants. So in general, for the most part, people pick the rootstock based on soil, temperature, water, and disease pressure. So certain rootstocks do better if soil has nematodes. Certain rootstocks do better in a really, really dry environment, and those would be rootstocks like from the Rhone area that are used to really low rain or really dry parts of Spain. And then there's other rootstocks that do well with sort of like wet feet. And so you think about, and then there's some that rootstocks that are low yielding. So if you have really, really fertile soil and you want to sort of cut down on the amount of green canopy to get your vines into balance, you might pick a sort of a lower yielding, less fertile rootstock. And then there's also rootstocks, of course, that can increase the fertility of the vine that do well in all kinds of soil. And then once you've picked your rootstock, you obviously pick what you want to grow. And Justin was talking about 4 whites, 3 whites and 4 different reds that they're trialing, including Tempranillo. Of course, at Torrey Hill, we have Pinot Noir. And then within that spectrum, you can, especially with Pinot Noir, you can start to talk about clone. At Torrey Hill, we have Martini Clone, which is an old California heritage clone. And of course, Pinot, as you guys know, I love to talk about clone. And there's so many clones of Pinot. It has to do with the DNA. It has a lot of microsatellite instability at the DNA level. And all those little permutations in the gene creates a lot of biodiversity for Pinot Noir. So actually what they do is they actually take the rootstock and they cut it down to a little stump, you know, that's just growing above the ground. And then they take the scion material, you know, your Tempranillo, and it's like a little stick. And they sort of whittle it down on both sides and they stick them together. and they cover it with tape like a wound. And eventually the two parts grow together. And that's how we plant vineyards in the modern way. All right, so let's move on to Sobranos. Does anybody have Sobranos open today? Awesome, Steve does. So, and Dave and Stephanie, hi guys. So Sobranos is one of my favorite vineyards because it comes from Santa Lucia Highlands and it's my only non-Sonoma fruit. But also this wine is so layered, so complex, changes so much in the glass that I really think it's a really fun and intellectual wine. Steve, do you feel comfortable unmuting and sharing your thoughts?
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I like the wine. It's very rich. It's, yes, multi-dimensional. It is a really nice wine. I enjoy it. Can I ask you one other question though? It's
Of
not
course.
related to the wine
Yeah, of
because I'm a
course.
newbie.
Mhm.
I looked on your site. I saw you were previously a doctor. So I'd be curious to know if all your medical training, your science training, how that has helped you in the wine world.
Oh, thanks for asking. You know, I came from pathology. So I went to medical school. I did an internship in general surgery, and then I went into pathology. So for those of you who don't know, pathologists are microscope doctors. When you get something taken out or a biopsy, it's the pathologist who reads that slide and writes the report and sends that report to your surgeon or to your primary care doctor. It's the pathologists that often lead, things like tumor board. So when I practiced medicine, it was, I didn't do a lot of patient care. It was really working a lot with doctors. I taught medical students. It was a very sort of research and academic driven kind of medicine. And I think that very much inspires the way that I approach winemaking. From an intellectual point of view, I love things like oxidation reduction chemistry, all of the microbiology, things that can go right, things that can go wrong, non-Saccharomyces yeast, phenol rings, benzenes, organic chemistry. I love all of that stuff. I also love experimentation and trying new things. So one thing that's kind of fun with the 2017 Sobranos, since we're on that, is that I pulled out about half a ton to do 100% whole cluster in a woody puncheon, in a 500-liter puncheon, to ferment it in there, which was super fun. Like, I love having the opportunity to try new things every harvest and to be really rigorous and thoughtful about what I do. And I think a lot of that probably comes from my having gone through residency and fellowship in pathology and published like 8 or 12 papers in 4 years and taught medical students. So I'm really good at the science of winemaking, and Justin can vouch for the fact that I'm pretty terrible when it comes to hooking up pumps. Doing the tri-clover closures, it takes me 3 times as long as everybody else to get pumps and hoses hooked up, but that's okay. I'll take that.
I wouldn't say that, but I would say that of all the multiple winemakers I've worked with over the years, Karitha has a scientific mental approach that is awesome, and her ability to get into the details and her knowledge of chemistry and things are just, it's awesome. It's over the top. So it comes through in what I would say is, I would describe as near perfect wines. I don't want to blow our head up too big, but they're spectacular. And I know the chemistry is spot on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely very consistent. I'm a plotter. I'll never win a marathon, but I've run a lot of them very slowly. And winemaking's the same thing. I'm very consistent. So yeah, I have that to my credit.
Yes.
Thank you. So Steve, I know you have a pretty good wine cellar and wine collection at home. How often do you drink wines from the Santa Lucia Highlands?
I like the Pisoni wines.
Mm-hmm.
I have lots of Pinots, lots of high quality Pinots. We were just up in that area this last week. My wife and I, we were in Big Sur. That's pretty close, right?
Yeah, it is pretty close. Yeah, it's just over the ridge.
So I like the wines. The Sobranos is not my favorite vineyard area, but I do like the wines in general. Not saying this wine. This wine's great.
Right.
But it's not as it's not my favorite site, I would say.
So yeah, so Sobranes is interesting because it's the extension of the Gary's Vineyard. So for those of you who don't know, the Pizzonis are one of the big farming families in the Santa Lucia Highlands. They do a lot of farming collaborations with the Franscioni family. They own some vineyards on their own, some vineyards in collaboration with them. So the Sobranes Vineyard is an extension of a vineyard called the Gary's Vineyard, which is a pretty well-known vineyard. And it's Gary's S apostrophe because it's owned by two guys named Gary. And Gary Pizzoni really, I think, wanted to capitalize on the success of Gary's, and he wanted to plant more vines. So he planted Sobranes Vineyard and with Gary Franscioni, and it's literally next door to Gary's. It's a newer planting. It was planted in 06. The first commercial crop was in 2010. So for me, one of the really interesting things that I found with the 2017 vintage was that we were really, 7 years into the vineyard, and we'll keep seeing this with, the upcoming vintages, that we were really starting to get more flavor development at lower bricks. So oftentimes in younger vineyards, they tend to be a little more fruit forward in their character. They tend to develop their secondary flavors at a slightly higher bricks. It takes them a little bit longer to get more than just sort of the fruit going. They tend to drop out their acid a little bit earlier compared to older vineyards. And 2017 was sort of the first vintage where I really started to see really delicious flavor development at lower bricks. And typically, as Steve pointed out, the Pinots from Santa Lucia Highlands can be rich, and they're often the style of Pinot that's over 14% alcohol. They often can handle sort of a more robust, toasty oak program. And I think my Sobranes shares that personality characteristic. And I would generally pick this fruit sort of when it hits sort of 24.8, 25.1, 25.3 on the bricks. And 2017 was the first year where I picked it, I think at 24.2 or 24.4, because the flavors were really already there. Another thing that was cool is I think that having some of that whole cluster really starts to build mouthfeel. And I think one of the hallmarks of Sobranes is having a really sexy palate. And going back to the vineyard sites, Gary's has been planted for a long time. And I think it has a really intense cult following. It has brambly fruit. It tends to be a bigger shouldered style of Pinot Noir. Rosella's is another really well-known vineyard that sits just north of Sobranes. And I think that one tends to be a little bit more feminine. And I think we're going to see Sobranes, as it develops as a vineyard, start to sort of straddle the two different styles. Does anyone else have Santa Lucia Highlands open? If you do and you're not on my screen, unmute yourself and shout it out, because I don't see everybody on the first screen.
Kareth, I don't have it open, but I will say this. The very first SLH, well, really the very first Pinot that I tasted that I really loved was a Sur-Loctel Gary's Vineyard Pinot Noir. And I can't remember the vintage. But up until then, I was like, I hated the barnyard funk that I got on. I had not tasted the right Pinots, obviously.
Yeah.
But I have fallen in love with SLH. I think it is it's the Grand Cru area, if you will. And I love the nuances. You mentioned Gary's and Rosella's. They are like night and day almost from the point of view of Gary's is so in your face and Rosella's is so refined. And I enjoy wines from a number of wineries that buy grapes from there. Most importantly is Adam Lee with Clarice.
Yeah.
And I just it is like my favorite. And I hate to say this, my second favorite is Santa Barbara. Santa Rita Hills is like my second favorite. And then I love Sonoma as well, but I hate to prioritize them, but there's just such an elegance in Santa Lucia Highlands, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think some of that is because Santa Lucia Highlands is just such a small, tight growing region. Sonoma is a behemoth, it's like 80 by 60 miles. So again, you're going to get lots of different varietals, lots of different styles, lots of different kind of wines that can be made in Sonoma because it's fertile and everything grows, which is a blessing. SLH, in contrast, is really small. Like it's literally 18 miles long. It is so small. And, there's limited hospitality. There's no big wineries. And obviously in Sonoma, we're very lucky to have, things like Kendall Jackson and Gallo, who are so philanthropic in the community and lift so many people up. But they produce a lot of wine. In SLH, you don't have any of those really giant producers. It's mostly family farmers with relatively small plots of land, and there's really no big wineries. So the biggest wineries there are probably Hahn and Mère Soleil, and obviously Mère Soleil is owned by the Wagner family. They own a lot of things, but it's still pretty small on a relative scale. And in some ways, that's wonderful because it maintains the integrity of the farming and puts farming first. Sometimes it's challenging when we invite sommeliers out there to learn more about SLH because there's not a lot of hospitality infrastructure in Santa Lucia Highlands. Anyone who's been to Healdsburg and Sonoma knows that we have awesome Michelin restaurants, a big, robust farm to table sort of hospitality program with great boutique hotels and charming squares and shopping and wonderful restaurants. You just don't find that in SLH. So they're really different kinds of communities, and I love being able to play with fruit from both of them. So
I will give you everybody a warning. If you're ever in the area and like Monterey or Pebble Beach or whatever, do not go to down, I think it's called River Road or whatever, on a Tuesday, because literally there are virtually no wineries open on Tuesdays. We did go to Hahn and we went to one other one, and it was like we walked in and it's like nobody else is there. The guy's got Steppenwolf playing he's playing an album. He's got an old, actually got LP playing. He goes, take this off if you want me to. And we're like, no, that's fine. And then he put on Steely Dan. So, but it is very laid back. It's not what you'd expect, what you'd find in all the other places. But the wines are spectacular, in my opinion.
That's true. And so true story that in 2013, I think it was 13 or 14, Subway finally opened in Gonzales. And it was such a huge deal that they had Subway that one time when we drove down to see Mark and Quinn Pizzoni and visit the vineyard, they were so excited. They're like, we're bringing you Subway. True story. That is how limited the hospitality infrastructure is around Santa Lucia Highlands. All right, so we are rounding the 5:40 mark. So we got to move into Zin because I know there's some people who are here just for Zin who are Zin lovers. So 2018 Zin, which will be a crowd pleaser. Again, 2018 is a delicious vintage. Does anyone have the Zin open? Who wants to cop to having Zin? Oh, Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, this is lovely. We've been Bialy club members for a long time, and of course most of what they provide is Zins, but that fruit mostly is not from the Sonoma area, and this is the rock pile is just lovely, and of course it's young. This is the first vintage we've had from you, Gareth, so love it.
Thank you.
Vibrant.
Thank you.
Red, a lot of red fruit. So a long finish, though. It's got a lot of structure to it, and fair amount of tannins on the finish.
Awesome. Thank you. So the 18, so I've been making rock piles in since 2009, but 2018 is a new vineyard for me. It's called the Glockner Turner Ranch. Before that, I'd been at the Rocky Ridge Vineyard, where actually, funny enough, my block was actually next to Bob Bialy's block. They do make a small amount of rock piles in, but yeah, you're absolutely right, Alan, that the bulk of what they do comes from Napa, and everyone knows Black Chicken Vineyard, and Bob Bialy's a lovely, lovely, nice guy. But we just, I was ready to make a vineyard change, but I didn't want to leave Rockpile. So I'm super excited to be in the Glockner Turner Ranch. And the first time that I went out there and pulled samples leading up to harvest, I was just over the moon. The color is so intense and so beautiful. The flavors are all there. It has a sumptuousness to it. Long finish, as Alan pointed out. And I think one of the cool things about Rockpile is that it does maintain an acidity, which makes it food friendly. As opposed to being really, Zins there's so many styles, just like Pinot, just like Chardonnay. There's Zins that can be really over the top and super high alcohol, and those are really fun. Like from Amador County, Martinelli Jackass Vineyard. Also, for me, I sort of like to keep the Zins under 15% alcohol. So, I mean, that's not a little Zin by any means, but I guess on the Zin scale, it's a little bit more restrained. And what I guess I love about Rockpile is that, again, it lends itself to being a really balanced Zinfandel, which is really fun. Anyone else have the Zin open? I'm super excited with the 18. All right, so now we're at 5:43. I thought I would just sort of leave some time for questions because I know there were people who missed the 2020 harvest wrap up, and then the Zoom recording cut out early. So in those last few minutes, if people want to unmute, if they want to look in the right questions in the chat box, I'm really happy to answer any questions about 2020.
Kirith, real quick, this is Mike
Yeah.
Locke.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hey, I heard you mention my name at the beginning, but I was still on a conference call, so I couldn't respond back. You were asking about the fires.
I was. How are you and your family?
We're fine. Here in Yorba Linda, this fire had started almost exactly where the one in 2008 started,
Oh.
and has followed a very similar path. It stayed a little bit north, but no problems to us and a lot of people that we know. Most of the houses are fine. There were 10 that were damaged, but far less damage than we had in 2008.
Well, that's good news. It seems like CAL FIRE has really, from talking to Robert at Grand Cru, CAL FIRE has really sort of amended the way that they fight fires, really working to save structures, but know that they can't always stop the path of the fire, which is interesting. Things I think we've had overall in Sonoma, at least fewer houses, homes, structures destroyed in 19 and 20 than in 17. How's your air quality?
It's pretty nasty, although this afternoon it actually has cleared up a little bit where you can see the sun. I haven't been outside because I've been working, but it's been really bad the last 2 days. It's like living in an ashtray.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. I know that we've had that in Sonoma. I know that
Oh yeah.
Greta and Kristen can speak to that because there were fires in Oregon. It just seems like it's tough. So just know that we're thinking of you guys, and we
Thank you.
Sonoma people can empathize with how it feels to face down fires. So I'm glad you guys are well.
And
All right.
just to piggyback on to Mike Meyer earlier, SLH, I prefer the Garys, but there's a lot of good stuff coming out of that area.
Absolutely. And I know you're a Zin fan. Do you have thoughts on Zin?
Well, one of my favorites is Maple Vineyards. We don't drink a lot of Zinfandel, but that one sticks in my mind as being one of my favorites that I go back to on a regular basis.
Awesome. All right. Does anybody have questions on anything that we might have covered in the 2020 harvest wrap up? Nope. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Did somebody just unmute for a question? Go ahead, Alan. Yeah.
Yeah, this may not be on topic for tonight.
That's okay.
But
That's okay.
any other comments about what's coming in terms of smoke and fire? I mean, you covered a lot of that in the last web Zoom meeting, but any new updates?
Yeah, I think it continues to evolve. And I know that's not the answer that anyone wants to hear. I don't think anybody is going to bottle a wine that is not delicious. Sonoma has worked too hard to build a reputation as being a fine wine growing region to bottle anything under their own label that's less than perfect. That said, the decisions that I made to not pick particular vineyards might not have been shared by other winemakers. It's been a really interesting year. We know a lot about smoke taint, a lot more than we did in 2008 when I had significant smoke taint in Anderson Valley. We know a lot more about smoke impact now, but there's a lot of things we don't know. So it's been challenging that we have relied a lot on laboratory work and lab data. And we have one really big lab that services all the wine regions from all of California, Santa Barbara North into Oregon and Washington. And I think they've also been challenged by the number of samples that they've had. So one of the hard things really has been getting results in a timely fashion. And one of the other really challenging things is that all of the compounds that we measure for smoke impact are already in the wine. So because we winemakers sort of wear blinders and don't think about smoke impact unless it's a smoky year per se, we don't actually have very good baselines on what those numbers should be in a normal year. So there were vineyards that I was not able to pick in 2020, which is very, very heartbreaking. And that was based on both micro fermentations and early lab data that we got. And there's vineyards, of course, that we did pick. They tasted delicious. We picked them really early in the year. We picked up in Anderson Valley before they had their fire, actually, 48 hours before the fires up in Mendocino, which was really lucky. And all of the lab data has been really positive. But as I said, it's really interesting because you're not going to get a 0 when you submit this stuff to the lab, because some of the compounds that we measure are already in Pinot Noir. One of the ones, for example, that's interesting is it's an aromatic compound called eugenol, and it sort of gives a clove characteristic to wine. But eugenol it just tends to be higher in Pinot Noir. And we don't have any really great baseline measurements for what it is in a non-smoke impacted year. Another example is Syrah. Syrah just lives with a high level of a compound called guaiacol. Even in a non-smoke impacted year, guaiacol in Syrah is really, really high. So even if you do have lab work, it becomes really challenging to interpret it. So some of it's just going to come down to tasting the wine as it develops in barrel. But I can promise that everything up to any fires we had in 2020, it was shaping up to be an awesome year. Different varietals handle smoke impact differently. Chardonnay takes it like a champ. I'm super excited with the Heinz. It just finished ML, so I sulfured it today and moved it to the cold room. It smells delicious. It's tasting delicious. So I'm super excited with the Chardonnay this year. Chardonnay really just seemed to be less impacted by smoke than other varietals. Petit Verdot, we know this from 17 and 19 over in Napa. It just seems to, it doesn't handle smoke impact as well as, say, I don't know, Cabernet or Chardonnay. So I think it's going to be an interesting year to see how all of these wines evolve. There were vineyards that I was not able to pick, and there were vineyards that I absolutely picked that I'm excited about. So does that answer questions, Alan? Awesome. It is 5:50. I've kept you guys on here for 5 minutes overtime. Do you have any other questions? If you do, shout them out. Oh, chat. I see someone in the chat. Lisa. Hi, Lisa. I like your mask. Well done. So I do have to point out that I did recently get some new fabric from Etsy, and it is rosé all day. I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm super excited. I have definitely mastered the rectangle. I have no idea how to sew a shirt, how to sew pants, but having done an internship in general surgery, I am very confident with my ability to sew a rectangle. So if anyone out there desperately loves rosé and would like a rosé mask, please email me because I made 4 of them yesterday, and I'm happy to send them out to people and share my wine themed fabrics that I'm getting off of Etsy. And on that note, you guys, I will say, Lisa, thank you for supporting the mask with my awesome sewing ability, which is not as good as my winemaking ability. And with that, I will say goodbye to everybody. Oh, and email me if you have ideas for topics for future Zooms. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you, everybody.
Love you, Kareth.
Thanks, you guys. Love you too. Have fun. Bye, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.